Okay, take two. Again, I'm Dr. Aimee Baron, and we are here for another episode of Talking Away The Taboo. It is my deepest pleasure and honor to be welcoming Sarah Ickovitz. I hope that technology will work this time. We're all going to pray and hope. As I was saying, sometimes, I see you, Sarah, I see you. Sometimes technology just doesn't. Oh, hopefully we're going to get lucky and it is going to work. And we'll just wait for Sarah to come. Okay, here. Wait, she's here.
Hi.
Okay.
Okay. Let's hope it works this
Oh,
time.
okay. All right. We're crossing our fingers. We're crossing
Yeah,
our
that was,
fingers.
yeah,
All right. So before we get any TBGBs or any other things that happen again, I think we should just launch into our conversation.
sounds
Um,
good.
so Sarah, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone? Tell people who you are. Give us a little bit about your background, and then and tell us also why your handle is named "Cake My Breath Away," and then we'll get into the fertility stuff.
Oh,
But first, just tell us who you are.
okay, so I'm Sarah. I am a mom of four kids with number five on the way. Divorced, remarried, and love to just share our lives and all the fun stuff. I really am like a stay-at-home mom that actually used to have a bakery. I did custom cakes and cookies for
Wow.
years, so that's where Cake My Breath Away comes from. And um, yeah, that's basically our story. I've been remarried for like 7 years now, and have teenagers and babies and
Okay.
home.
All right. So let's get, well, first of all, okay, what kind of like cakes and cookies did you make? And do you still do it, or like that has been retired and like no more, no more?
Never again. Well, never say never, but I don't think I'll ever do it again.
Okay.
I stopped a few years ago, and I was just like done. I used to do all the fondant cakes
Oh wow.
and like all the fancy stuff, cookies, like decorated, very tedious work.
Very, very tedious and very meticulous and impressive work. Like really, you have to also have a lot of time. So I
Yeah, it was
imagine,
very time
yes.
consuming.
Okay. Okay. So I think which sort of leads us into this
Wait, you're frozen.
conversation. Okay. Oh wait, you're back.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, which I think leads us into this conversation because, as you said, you are a mom of four, God willing, five, B'Shah Tova, that you are expecting again now. But we're here to talk about your fertility story, your fertility journey. So, why don't you maybe take us back? And I think maybe let's do a little bit of a preview. The preview for people who've been following you or people who don't necessarily know is that you've had to use IVF for genetic reasons
Yeah.
in your fertility journey, and we'll get to all of those details, but that's basically where we're going and why we're having this conversation. And I think, in light of National Infertility Awareness Week, which is right now this week, I think one of the things that people don't think about when we sort of have these bigger conversations about infertility, people just think, oh, it was a problem with the sperm or there was a problem with the eggs and you needed a doctor to kind of help you get pregnant. Not that you were specifically avoiding getting pregnant with, maybe some kind of genetic issue, and then that's the reason why you had to go to go to a fertility doctor. So I really wanted to bring this conversation in this week specifically for that reason. So take us back to the beginning when you were younger. When did you know that there might be something, that things might not go according to plan, whatever that means?
So it's actually interesting. I had a Dare Sharon about 20 years ago. I
Tell
was
tell people who don't know what Doria Sharam is, tell
so
people what that is.
it's genetic testing, but it's limited genetic testing, which is important information.
Okay, so
They're
just say
only for
say it one more time because you froze for a second. It's
oh,
genetic
sorry.
testing, but
It's
it's
limited genetic testing. So, which is part of my whole story. So basically, I was dating a guy, and we were like planning on getting married, and had this that we were both carriers for the same genetic disease. And it was devastating. And it was interesting because in the Jewish press at that time, apparently it was a new disease that they started testing for.
Oh, interesting.
And it is not what I'm a carrier for now. With this, but it was in the Jewish press, they had an art, like an ad that said, if you have healthy children until now, that doesn't mean that you will continue having healthy children. There's a new disease and you should actually get tested for it. And I thought that that was very interesting because, you think you do the testing and that's it. You don't have to worry about it. So for me, that was just something I kept with me always. And I actually had a second bad dairy charm. I've never like really shared this with people. And I think like, because it was so taboo
Yeah.
and people really didn't speak about it. But that first one, I actually went to a geneticist who 20 years ago, IVF was not such a great option. And she was like, walk away.
Wow.
Yeah, which was really interesting because now it's a whole different ballgame. And I
Yeah.
think it's so important to share this because I don't think that things are what they were back then. And you don't have to walk away. So, so I had that, and then I got married and had three beautiful, healthy children naturally.
Just to
Yeah.
clarify, you got married to a
Oh, sorry.
different
It was
person.
somebody else.
Okay.
I walked away from those
Yep.
relationships. Both were, it was difficult, and then got married to my ex-husband, had my children, got divorced, met my current husband, and he was going to law school. We were in a relationship for a long time before we got married, but we had done Darya Sharim, and then we got married at the end of law school, and he was taking on three kids. He was never married before. He's 6 years
Wow.
younger than me. Like,
Wow.
and he was taking on three kids. So
Wow.
we decided to not rush into having kids immediately because he was taking on this role as a dad, a new, really stressful job. And like, it just wasn't the time.
I can
So then when we, yeah,
can I pause you for
sure.
a second? And I have a couple of questions. If for I want to talk about the fertility piece and then your dating piece for a second. The when you did Jari Sharim again, this second time with your current husband, it came up clean,
Yeah,
or
it was
it just
fine.
came up clean?
Totally fine.
Okay. Okay. And secondly, I think, for all the people out there that are still waiting for their person, and I'm asking this very specifically because we have a lot of singles in the I was supposed to have a baby community who don't know and are hoping that at some point they will be able to have a family with a partner, with a spouse at some point in the future, and they're not there yet. And the and people always say that when you get older or if you have children, it becomes even more difficult and more difficult. We are not stories of hope and Sapora Gradko, but I always love if it's possible to share some pieces of inspiration for people. Can you share a little bit about that story for the people who are listening to give them that support and hope?
Yeah, definitely. I always say, like, put yourself out there and just like positive vibes and, just keep an open mind. I met my husband. He's 6 years younger than me. He was in his early 20s. I was in my later 20s, married and divorced with three kids. He was never married, heading to Harvard Law School. So like this is not like some desperate guy that like needs to just, marry anybody. Um, you know, and it's Hashem really just like puts you in each other's path if it's meant to be. And I'm just like, if he wasn't open minded, like we happened to meet someplace and I was upfront about everything, he knew I had kids and whatever, and we just clicked. And I think that that my thing is just always just, you never know, like maybe on paper they're not perfect, but if they're not bad, give them a chance. Like if there's nothing major red flags, give it a chance because you just never know who like who that person is that's just going to be, the love of your life. And it really, Baruch Hashem, we have gone through a lot, and we are really, thank God, a tight couple. So
Amazing.
it's,
Amazing.
there's hope out there. Like,
Amazing. Amazing. Again, like not the focus of this conversation, but I felt like we couldn't just gloss over that part. I really wanted people to hear that piece also. Um,
definitely.
okay, so you know, unbeknownst to anyone, you find this guy. He's 6 years younger than you. You click, it works. You get married, and then what?
So then when we finally decided, like, okay, we're ready, the time is right, I said, you know what? Let's do genetic testing at the OB's office. Because I remember this article from the Jewish press. And I know we're not necessarily safe just because it was good a few years ago. So we went and we were tested. It happens to be what we're carriers for is not life threatening, but it's not a life I would want. Like, I wouldn't want my kid to suffer at all. Like, even if it's anything, one of the things is infertility, which I said, if I could take shots and do it and possibly save them from that, like, I would rather do that. No, like, I don't want to go into something knowing that I'm putting my kid in a spot where life might be difficult. Like, things happen and, that's life, but like, I'm not going to go into it putting them in a bad spot. So, this is something Daryasham does not test for. And that's why I'm very careful to say, like, I think people should get genetic testing also on the side, because there are things that are maybe not life threatening, but we don't want to have them. And, IVF is an option.
Right.
And,
I want to come back to that later on in the conversation, but I think you're bringing out a really deeply important point that number one, like that Jewish press article that Jewish press ad was brilliant. And how many more people like you who also like really just took that in and remembered it all those years later. It is absolutely the case that medical science is constantly changing. We're constantly finding new diseases, new disorders of things that were not able to be tested for way back when. And yes, like the OBs are saying to people, they're recommending to people that anytime that you're considering getting pregnant, regardless of whether you've had testing already, you should be tested again, because you never know what you're going to find. And then exactly what you just said.
well,
Go
the
ahead.
funny
Go
thing
ahead.
is,
Yeah.
I had done my embryo transfer for this baby, and I went to my OB, and he's like, "Do you want to do genetic testing?" There's like another 100 things that came out. I was like, "No, I'm already like, I'm already in this. Like, we're
We're
good.
good.
We're not. Yeah, like
You'll say.
I've done this. Now I have to put my trust in God. But
Totally.
like at that point, but like I was shocked. Like it was 2.5 years, 3 years, like, and they came out with like a whole bunch of more things,
Yes.
which was
Yes.
wild.
It is, I mean, medical science is so like it's remarkable. It is really remarkable how much things can change. I remember that, during my youngest children are 11. But when I was pregnant with them, and then when I was pregnant with my older ones, I mean, the number of things that were tested for, I mean, dramatically increased. So absolutely. Okay. So you find out that you have this thing, and it's again, like I think also the nuance is important here. This is not like this is whatever it is, and it's none of our business. That whatever this thing is, it's not like Tay-Sachs. It's not like a horrific disorder, where a neurodegenerative disorder or some other thing that is going to be absolutely horrific, but it's something that you wouldn't necessarily want to pass on to your children.
Right.
We had a conversation actually with people previously who were carriers of the BRCA gene, for example, like people who knew that they were carriers of the breast cancer gene, and they themselves like, didn't want to pass that along to their children. So it wasn't even that they knew that that it was some specific issue that would cause a life-threatening illness in their child when they were young. It was something what maybe when that child was older, and they also did IVF for genetic reasons. So very similar.
Yeah. It's really like this really wasn't it's not something major at all, but it's like it'll affect their lives. And this is
100%.
like from like childhood, it would like affect them. So it's like I'm just not gonna like through their whole life, I'm just not gonna do that to a kid if I didn't have to.
And was your husband also on board? Did he feel
100%.
similarly?
100%. We, from the beginning, it was like, that was like the first thing we were like, okay, I guess we're doing IVF. Like, it wasn't even a question. Like, especially because I had spoken to a geneticist in the past. So, like, I knew a bit about like that was the option to do. And then my doctor said something to me about it, and we were like, okay, that's just it. And we just got on that right away.
And did people, like, who knew about this? Like, who did you share it with? Because you said that you had already waited because, he had three kids and he was younger, and he like to acclimate him to school and to marriage and being a father and so on. I'm imagining, and maybe I'm imagining wrongly, but I know with lots of people when they get married, often after a certain amount of time, there are like these so new, like what's happening? What's going
He
on?
would
So,
get that more than I would. People were like, oh, or I would actually get like questions on Instagram, even like, doesn't Shlomo want his own kids? And
oh my gosh.
yeah, people would say that from time to time, but we definitely didn't share right away. We shared with our parents, and then a couple of like siblings, and I was actually on Facebook groups, IVF Facebook groups that were so helpful. I made some really good friends there that literally I would speak to every day, still years later, talk to them every day. And we really went through it together. We would send each other gifts when we had an egg retrieval or what, like we were there for each other, and it really makes a difference to have that support. I think it's so important. I always tell people that is like one of the things because people don't get it unless you're in it. Like I never understood, and I even doing it for genetic reasons, I don't understand all the other
Yep.
nuances with it. But like it's like you just don't get it if you haven't been in it. So there's something nice about sharing this with people who are in it with you. So I didn't share with the world until is it World July 25th, a year after my baby was born, and it's National Infertility Day or something, right?
Sure.
IVF
Sure.
Day, something. The day that the first IVF baby was
Okay.
born is
Okay.
July 25th. It was also the day of my baby's transfer,
Okay.
my first baby. So I actually like shared on that day a year later with everybody. People did not know what was going on. I got messages while I was going through IVF, oh, you're putting on weight or things like that, like lovely things. But so there was that. But otherwise, I was very quiet about it, except for our friends, our like family. My kids didn't know
Really?
until after.
Okay.
Well, I told them I had a thyroid issue because they had put me on Synthroid because I didn't want them to be scared. I was going to the doctor a lot. They were
Right. Yep.
teenagers,
Okay.
but and I was getting shots and everything. But I didn't want to scare them that something was wrong with me. But I also didn't think it was appropriate for them that time to know. Now this time they knew from the start because
Right.
you know
Right.
they recognized it. Like we just told them right away. We're like, okay, they're gonna know.
Yeah.
But the last time we didn't do that. We just kept it kind of quiet. But like I was recording everything so everybody when it was time we could let everybody know what was going on.
And can you share, like, for people who don't really have an understanding as to the process of IVF for genetic reasons, like this is not regular IVF, like can you just kind of do a broad overview of like at what point did you start, and then when did you end up like having your baby? Like, because I think some people think like, oh, you go for shots and you get a lot of eggs and then you create an embryo and then they implant and then like, you should have a baby within a year. Like that's like probably normal. I tell people about this process.
So actually, it's interesting because when I first had my conversation with my doctor, she like started with percentages and like based on my age, I was 36 at the time, and she's like, "So you'll probably get this much," and like, and she kept knocking it down. Like it was, I think it was like 25 eggs or something like that. And then we got into the process, and I ended up with 5 eggs. And our first round, it was 5 eggs. Only one became an embryo. And they also have to do a probe for us. So they take DNA from us and from our parents, and they create this thing to find the exact gene in the embryo. So interesting how they do this,
Yeah.
but we had to send it off to get tested. So when you're testing for that, they're also testing for chromosomal abnormalities because they have to do both. So our one embryo got sent out, and it was fine for our genetic disease, but it had a chromosomal abnormality. And I was devastated because I was like, I went through this whole thing and, got one embryo. I have low AMH, so I'm not getting a lot of eggs. Even like at 36, when she's saying, oh, you might get like 20, I was getting 5. And that was like really hard and frustrating. But then I was like, okay, I'm being saved from something. That's why I had to do IVF. I was being saved from this because if I would have gotten pregnant naturally, maybe my baby would have had this chromosomal abnormality. So I was being saved from something. So that was just my mindset. That's how I live my
Beautiful.
life. Is
It's a
you know,
beautiful perspective. Beautiful.
thank
Incredible.
you. I always say Hashem is totally taking care of me, and whatever it is, it's for the best. So it took me a minute or two, but like that was in the end you know my perspective on it. And then I started my next cycle, and I got again 5 eggs, but we ended up with 4 embryos this
Wow.
time.
Wow.
Yeah, so but only 2 were healthy. None of them, of all 5 embryos, none of them had the genetic disease,
Wow.
which was, in my mind, crazy.
Absolutely
But
miraculous.
um, yeah, but only 2 were healthy, and so that's my 2-year-old and this one. Um, a month later, I think it was about, we did a transfer, and it took, and then we did another transfer in November this year, and thank God it took.
Baruch Hashem.
And so that was our situation with it. And we got very lucky, and we beat the numbers game tremendously, which is, I say, it is all in God's hands, because according to my doctor's percentages, we should have had nothing. And I literally cried to her at one point. I said to her, I'm like, should I get an egg donor? Like, what should I do? And she's like, you're going to have a baby. You're going to have a baby. And, she was right.
Wow.
But it was hard. It was one of those things where it was like, is this ever going to happen? And I know it was quick. It was quick, but like, even then it was like, you just don't know. And like, I was hitting, so I did my first transfer a day after I turned 37. So I was like, if like, you know, anything happens, then I'm back to square one, because my insurance wouldn't let me do more retrievals until I implanted all of the
Oh,
embryos.
wow.
So I
Okay.
had to do all my transfers before I could do another retrieval.
Okay.
So for me, that was like nerve wracking, because it was like, you know, what's going to happen? And even, is this one going to work this time? Because I'm 39 now. And like, if it didn't work, then I'm old to start when my AMH was so low at 36.
Right. Right. Just for by way of explanation for those of you who are not familiar with some of these terms. So the AMH is a blood test that they do. It's the anti-Mullerian hormone. It's basically an indicator of how many eggs a woman has and the quality of the eggs. And the higher the number, the more possibility, the more eggs, the better quality. The lower number, the fewer eggs and lower quality. And so we know that as you get older, that number goes down, that you don't have as many eggs anymore and the quality gets lower. And they say that sort of drop off, like you kind of like, when you start in your 20s, you're kind of you're here, and then you're slowly this, but then when you turn 35, it kind of goes like this. And then it keeps going down. I kind of went off the screen there, but I think everybody sees what I'm doing. And so it sounds like for you that all like a typical person potentially of your age, what your doctor was saying is that you might have gotten 25 eggs, but for you, you only got five each time. And playing the numbers game when us medical, and I'm using myself here as a medical professional, I am a physician, although this is not my area. I'm a pediatrician by training. But we know that, if you get, let's call it 25 eggs, then the number of eggs that then will fertilize, if everything looks good, probably is about half that. I'm, again, playing with these numbers. So let's say that maybe you'll get 12 embryos. Then those 12 embryos, in Sarah's case, had to be tested, number one, for generally genetic disorders like Down's disease or any other trisomies, any other kinds of genetic disorders. And it also had to be tested for the genetic disorder that she and her husband were carrying. So, as she said, in that first round, they only got one embryo. And that embryo, even though it didn't have the genetic disorder that she herself carried, that they carried, it had something else. So it wasn't usable. And so you see very quickly that the numbers go down and down and down. So, sometimes people say in this world that maybe if you have 25 eggs, that you might end up with one live baby at the end. Because it's not, even when you have a good embryo, a healthy embryo, there's no guarantee that that embryo will enable you to get pregnant. And then there's also no guarantee that when you get pregnant, that that pregnancy will stay, and that, God willing, you will have a baby in your arms in 9 months. Like it is a numbers game. And I think just the magic and the absolute miracle of what you experienced, where things didn't look so great from a numbers perspective, and yet here you are. So my question is, how, how did you, like, you have this incredible, as you said, like just this incredible perspective of like, Hashem, God is saving me from something. I'm gonna be okay. This is gonna be okay. Like, how is that the way you've always been? How do you do that? How, like what do you share with people who I'm sure have come to you because you're so open about your story now, and when they're going through things, how did your husband feel about all of this? What was his perspective? You know, how Share a little bit about that.
Okay, so this has always been my way of thinking with everything. Like all the things that I've been through, I'm like, I was being saved from this, and like I see later that it was true. Like there was a reason. I really believe everything happens for a reason and everything happens in the right time. And it's so important that we keep that in mind. And I tell that to people that come to me all the time. I'm like, my baby was supposed to be born when it was supposed to be born. That's who they are. So, like, I was getting frustrated at one point. I thought they were going to have to push off my transfer. And I was like getting frustrated. And then I was like, but then my baby wasn't meant to be born in August. My baby is meant to be born in September or October. Like, it wasn't meant to be. That's not like, and you know, I don't want to do something that's not going to work. Like, because in the back of my mind, it's like it's supposed to be when it's supposed to be, And I'm very funny with that, with like, I don't like to play games with like things. I'm like, if it's meant to happen, it's gonna happen, and that's how it should be. And like, even when I'm like praying for something, I'm like, if it's gonna be good, let it be. And if it's not gonna be good, like, because you don't know with things in life, including babies and everything, if it's gonna cause heartache or whatever, like, let's just not have, that happen. I would rather, have it take a little longer or things like that. And so anytime somebody says to me something about that, I'm like, okay, it's frustrating and it's upsetting and it's hard and it is hard. And like the way to get through I really feel is to like look at it and try and find like the positive in it, or the way that like it just wasn't like, it's not their time. Like they need like this particular baby has to be born when it's supposed to be born. Like it's a person. Like it's you know what I mean. So there's that like you have to believe in a higher power to make it through this sometimes, I think.
No, I mean, 1,000%, 1,000%. I think it's such a important and beautiful perspective, and not everyone can get there, right?
No,
Like not everyone
it's not.
has that sort of like that really like I, I'm like hesitant to call it like umuna or bitachon, even though I think like that's the core of it. But I think that for some people, that's really hard for them to access. And but to hear you in the midst of all of this, and also, you're a person who has been through other struggles in life, and to continue to have that perspective on this as well, I think is really just an very powerful for people to hear.
I really try to live life that way because I think it it just makes things make sense a little bit. Because when you're going through the hard things, listen, my husband was 22 when I met him. I was married for 8.5 years before that, and I had 3 kids. Like, it had to happen the way it happened, like he was in high school or whatever when I
Right,
married my
right.
ex-husband. Like, it had to happen the way it happened. And like, so I could look at it and be like, oh, I went through this horrible experience, but no, my horrible experience led me to my husband. So, it just like everything, it just has to happen in the right time, and it has to really like fall into place. And that's why with everything, including dating and all that, it has to just be the right time, the right person will, be there. It sounds a little crazy, I think, to some people, but it's
Look, you know what I always say? I we know we can't tell people what to think, right? We can't tell people don't be sad. We can't tell people
no,
don't
for sure.
worry. We can't tell people just daven more. We can't tell people like Hashem has a plan for you, right? Like we can't tell people that, but if that's what you deeply believe, and that's what gives you strength, and gives you the ability to get up in the morning and go on and get through the hard, then that's incredible. That's incredible. Like we can't prescribe it for
No,
other people.
for sure. But people don't even think it sometimes. Sometimes, like, once they hear it, it's like, oh, okay, that actually makes sense. Like, sometimes it's just not the way we're brought up, or we're like, it's just not in us to see it. So sometimes when people hear it, they're like, okay, actually, and it doesn't fully make it easy, any of this stuff, but it takes away some of the sting sometimes. And it's helpful in some ways, I found, to just like, get through the hard things, because,
Absolutely. Uh,
life is hard and things are hard. And
Totally.
we
Totally.
can sit and wallow in it, or we can, try and see the positive, and hope that, like, we'll see the good in the end, because there's a
Absolutely. Absolutely. Were there any points that were particularly difficult? Like beyond you mentioned already when transfers were being pushed off, or when you got results that you weren't expecting. Like, were there times, like certain holidays, where other people around you, or certain events or things where other people were saying things, or people were having kids and you weren't able to have yet? Like, were there particular times that were more difficult, and this emuna, this faith, like really bolstered you?
So I don't think, like, more like towards like before we even found out about this, like I like had wanted to have another baby. So like there was kind of that like feeling like when other people would have babies, like, oh, I hope that that happens for me, not knowing that there was any issues, because you never know with this stuff. And but through IVF, I really didn't feel that way. Like I said, thank God it was pretty quick, but I tried not to feel that way with things, because like I knew I was doing what I had to do, and I just was like, if it's meant to happen, it's gonna happen, and like I really hope it does. But like, I don't want to take away from like being happy for somebody else or whatever. Like, um, I'm sure I lost my light.
All good.
um, sorry, it's a
All,
little dark.
it's all good.
I definitely, I think there were times, I'm sure, that were like a little like difficult, but like nothing like that stands out to me that I remember. Like,
I
because
Thank God. Thank God.
yeah.
And sort of in closing here, I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about, how you um how you speak to people who are going through this, with when they find out that there's something going on, potentially with some sort of genetic issue, if they're nervous about going to doctors, if they're nervous about the waiting, if, the thought of like, I can't believe I have to do all of this just to have a baby when everyone else can just, have a nice time one night, and everything is, and we have a baby, 9 months later. Like that, this process is very, very hard. It is not what people expect or what people think is going to happen. You have a particularly positive outlook towards this and towards everything in life, it really seems, which is incredibly inspiring. But for the people who are super nervous and just like don't know if they can handle this, what advice do you give to them?
So I don't get so many genetic questions. A lot of people I find are doing it just, for just fertility issues, like that they have to for that. In general, I honestly, I take it case by case, and I really like try to just talk to them and hear them, and just, I always tell them like if they're interested in hearing like what I think is helpful. Like, I did acupuncture. I think that that was really helpful. I took CoQ10. I'm like, ask your doctors, but like people don't know about a lot of these things. And I really think that they help. So I always try to just like, if you're open to it, like maybe ask your doctor about these couple of things, because I think that there's something to it. Um, and then like as they're going through it, a lot of times they're like reaching out to me throughout the process and asking questions, and I just try to be there for them, in their own situation, and be able to help them specifically with like their needs, because every person's different and they're all feeling differently. But I just try to give them hope and tell, like, I feel like, I don't know, I didn't find the shots to be so bad, and like I felt like I was doing something, which was like, for me, that was like that got me through it, I think, a lot. Like I was excited when I got my box of shots, because I was like, okay, we're doing this, and we're being proactive, and like, so I try to like put that like positivity and just like the motivation there, because I think that once you're like in that mindset of like, I'm doing something proactive, and hopefully it'll work, and it just, I think it's helpful to people. um and then I try to stay positive with them, and
Yeah,
you know?
no, I think I think what you're saying is actually really powerful because the idea, so much of the IVF process, if you know that IVF is part of your journey, whatever the reason is, it's a lot of hurry up and wait. Like you have to wait for your blood test and you have to wait for your cycle to be at the right time. And then you have to wait for tests to come back. And then you have to, like, there's a lot of waiting. We
Yeah.
actually are going to be spending a lot of time talking about waiting on I was supposed to have a baby next week. And the, like, as opposed to the regular person that kind of decides, okay, it's September and I want to have a baby in 9 months. So this will be the month that, we'll make sure we time out the ovulation and we'll figure it out and we'll, get going, right? So like everything is sort of out of your control and you have to wait for other people to tell you when you can start. So this idea of like now you can actually do something like, oh, like it's exciting because now you can do as opposed to just sitting and waiting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it makes perfect sense.
It's also like I try to like look at the numbers also, like when they're like, oh, especially for the genetic stuff, because it's a little different when they're like, oh, like with IVF, you have this percent chance of getting pregnant on a random month, and without it, you have this percent chance. And it's like, okay, so my chances were higher. Right. So like that's a good thing. Like, so for the genetic things, I definitely think that there's like that, like little bit of like, okay, like I gave myself a little bit of a higher chance than I would have naturally also like on a random month because I remember when she said that to me, I was like, okay, like that's
Right.
good. Like, okay, I'm 36. Like that's
Right.
helpful,
Right.
you
No,
know?
I think that that's actually really powerful also because I mean what Sarah is saying, and I don't remember the exact numbers myself, but on an average month, there's a certain percentage, whatever, maybe it's 20, if I remember, I think it's 20%, maybe, where if everything is working perfectly and you're just, naturally trying to get pregnant, then you have about a 20% chance of getting pregnant. But in that chance, you could get pregnant with an embryo that is not genetically like typical, is not genetically normal, and then that embryo will never develop into a baby. Like it's just not going to happen. Um, but when you go through all of these genetic pieces, the embryo that you have is a good embryo. Now, there's obviously a chance that even with a good embryo, it might not stick, but if it does stick, the likelihood, there is a higher likelihood, and again, I don't know what that percentage is, but there is a higher likelihood that things really could be okay. And so I think,
Yeah,
that
I think it was like
playing those
20% to
odds.
50% or
Right,
something. I was like, okay,
right,
like,
right.
so definitely like to me that was like a big thing that okay, like it just gave a little extra of like, I'm doing this and maybe it's for the best because of my age as well and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely it's a process and it's but there's something about like knowing you're just doing something instead of just sitting there. And
100%.
and I've done it both ways. That's the thing.
Right.
I've done the ovulation tests and like okay, this is it and like whatever. And I've done that and I've done this and I felt as excited, I think, and motivated once I got my shots coming to like do it that like, it was like, okay, we got this. We're gonna do this. And like, there's disappointment in regular also. It doesn't always work, naturally. Like, you get disappointing months
Of
and it
course.
happens. So you get disappointing cycles too. Um, I would definitely say though, anybody who's doing IVF, be pushy with your doctors. Like stand your ground and like be on top of them because they're not going to be on top of everything like you will. And I think that that gets the ball moving and it gets things done on time if you're like motivated and on top of it. Because I find that like from people I know and stuff like that, that tends to be like an issue where like the doctors are not necessarily um, doing the stuff that like they're not being proactive. You have to be proactive and you have to reach out and be like, hey, this is, this is the situation, or this is when, like, can we do this? Like you have to reach out and you have to be on top of it more, like more than you would normally have to be with things, I think, because it is a numbers game and a time game and everything. And like, you don't want to miss it because like your doctor doesn't respond fast enough or things like that. Like you got to be on top of it.
I think that's super great advice. I mean, I think with all things that and especially medical things, that you have to advocate for yourself. You have to. You are the one who knows you best. You are the one who knows your timeline best. Your doctor is dealing with hundreds or maybe thousands of patients, even if they have lots of nurses and PAs and whatever it is, but you are the one who knows you best. And so absolutely to advocate for yourself,
Yeah,
advocate, advocate, advocate.
yeah, because with fertility, I've definitely heard so many times where people are like, "Oh, we missed the cycle because like," and it's like something silly. It's like they didn't call in the prescription fast enough, like, or it's like some silly little thing where I've sat on the phone with the insurance companies, like, "I need this done and I need it done now, and you're gonna do it," like, and I would harass them because otherwise you lose a cycle, you lose a month, like, and I think like people don't realize like you can push and you can do and you can like, move things faster if that's, something that you want. So you don't miss things. Because that was
Absolutely.
frustrating for me always was like, when these things come up and it's like I like things on my schedule and like I'm a planner. So
A
it's
thousand percent. No, and I think it's like it creates more of the waiting and more of the disappointment and more of the anxiety.
right.
Um, any other any last thoughts to the people out there who are listening, who may be doing IVF for genetic reasons or just dealing with infertility or any other fertility struggle out there? Your last words of advice to those people.
So definitely, like, you do not have to give up a relationship for fertility, for genetic issues. I think that's so important to know. Definitely get tested before every single pregnancy. It's important. You don't know what changes. And just trust the process. I know it sounds so, I don't know, cliche, but it's so true. Like that, I know it's frustrating, but when the time is right, it's going to happen. Just do everything you can in your power. Take the medications that you have to take. Do the diets that they recommend. Do anything you can, but like, also like relax and somewhat, give it to God, like, and trust that there's something to that as well, because I think that helps with the calming down. And I think being calm also helps with the whole process and situation. It all goes hand in hand.
All goes
The more
hand in
stressed
hand.
you are, the harder it is. So, um, I think that's, and I hope everybody gets the babies that they want.
Amen. Amen. And just to close out here, what I will say, and to add on to Sarah's point about genetic testing, JScreen is one of the companies that offers genetic testing. You can get it done through them. You get it done through their through your OB office. We actually have someone who sits on our board, SD Rose. She actually is one of the staff at one of the genetic counselors actually at JScreen, and she was able to arrange a discount code for anyone who uses genetic testing through JScreen, and we'll have that listed in the show notes here and also in the show notes on the podcast when it comes out. So regardless of what company you use. And I want to say, like, we do not get any kickbacks from this at all. We get nothing. You as the consumer and as the patient, whoever you are, should get genetic testing, period. JScreen is one of the companies that does that. But Sarah, I can't thank you enough. Um, it's really just incredibly inspiring to hear you speak and how positive you are about going through this process and just giving people support and inspiration and hope. I'm really so grateful to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And if anybody wants, feel free to DM me. I'm happy to chat and discuss any of these things. If you just need somebody to talk
We
to.
we will
Yeah.
have all of her contact information also in all of the different pieces that go along with this conversation. Sarah, thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good
Have a
night,
good night.
everybody.
Night.